Hello, everyone, and welcome to Win, a show where we interview champions and trailblazers and ask questions to uncover and discover their championship traits for succeeding in sports, work, and life. Win is part of Grit, a PivotalMomentsMedia.com channel focused on breaking the stigma surrounding mental fitness in sports. Visit PivotalMomentsMedia.com for more episodes, content, and education on how we can tackle that challenge together. Our guest today is one of the hosts from the extremely popular podcast Zero Pod 30 on Barstool Sports. He has also served in the U.S. Army, having graduated from West Point, where he was a varsity quarterback for the academy, and that's following a stellar high school football career. Above all, Captain Khan, or Khan as he's known on Twitter, is clearly a mental fitness advocate, and we're looking forward to diving into that today. Connor Crehan, thanks for giving us some time to be on Win today with JB and I.
Hey, Lee, JB, it's great to be with you. Figure it's the least I could do. JB has been on ZBT before, so I'm happy to return the favor here, do a little home and home, and I appreciate the intro and joining you guys today.
Yeah, it's great. Connor, thanks for being on. I remember watching you play. I remember when you were a grad assistant there at West Point too. You grew up, you were a standout football player growing up. Mm-hmm. You played Division I football. I consider the most prestigious university in the modern free world, West Point. Talk us through that early process, wanting to attend the academy and just getting in there and being part of Army football.
Right. So my Army football story goes back to when I was a young kid, because my grandfather was a graduate, class of 1952. So I'd been going up to West Point, very familiar with it since I was probably 4 years old. Went to countless Army Navy games, but it was always just kind of something in the background, right? It was, we rooted for Army. I didn't follow the team like a diehard or anything, but we'd go to games from time to time. And then as I progressed into high school and probably after my sophomore year, when I really started to realize, okay, maybe I could go do this at the next level, I always said I would never go to West Point. I went to Catholic school my whole life, so I was always wearing a uniform, a lot of rules. I was like, there's too many rules. It's the Army. I don't want to do that. I just want to play football. I don't necessarily have a school that I've pinpointed, but it's not going to be West Point. And then lo and behold, they started coming around. This guy, Coach Derek Jackson, I remember, great guy. And he started coming around and I realized, maybe that is a viable option. So a lot of correspondence back and forth with Coach Jackson. And then, as everybody knows, you take your official visits. And I have 5 visits scheduled to schools pretty much up and down the East Coast. And West Point was my first visit. And I've heard other guys say this too. I can't really explain it, but when I was there and going on my visit and watching guys work out and practice, something just clicked.
Right.
I didn't take another visit. I was like, this is it.
Wow.
This is where I'm going. I am committed to Army. I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this atmosphere, a part of this storied program. And I just didn't look back. And from there, I go into my senior year of high school. 9/11 happened, my senior year of high school.
Wow.
And as a 17-year-old kid, I'm not going to sit here and say like, I predicted what the next 20 years was going to look like. I mean, I was very well aware of my commitment in the Army after West Point, but it didn't occur to me that after 4 years of school, we would still be involved in any sort of conflict.
That's right.
Granted,
right.
17, deciding to go to West Point, I knew, okay, all right, this is going to really set me up beyond college, beyond the Army. I knew that much. And I had the mindset that I'm doing something that is going to bode well for my future. But the idea of deploying to Iraq never really entered my mind. And it didn't really become a reality until I was in school and then we started training. And I think when it really started to hit home was during the summer training, when we started having soldiers come back who had deployed. And then junior, senior year, I started having instructors who had a deployment under their belt. And I'm not talking Desert Storm or Panama. I'm talking they were in Afghanistan, they were in Iraq. And I think that's when we realized, all right, this isn't really going away. And then it came to light that I ended up deploying to Iraq in 2008. And I'm not really sure I remember what the initial question was, JB, but that's where we're at now.
No, that was it. That's it. You going there. And I'll just follow up on that. I like how in your one article you talk about, you're a field artillery officer but in Iraq and Afghanistan, you're all infantry officers. Right. So it like, the war evolved. They're like, yep, you're doing that. And so you had to, kind of, change. Obviously your leadership's still the same, but the battlefield mission becomes a little different.
Right. No, and it absolutely did. And I think we started to get an idea of what that was going to be like during, JRTC, leading up to going to Iraq. And we realized, all right, there's not much use for paladins over here, shooting long range artillery, in some parts of the country, maybe a little bit, but not for us, not where we were going. And I think it was important then to get guys in the mindset like, hey, first and foremost, you're a soldier. So let's hone in on these skills that are going to serve us well when we get over there. And that's really just what we focused on. We focused on being soldiers first. Sure, we stayed sharp on our artillery way of life, but it was just so imperative that I had these guys locked in. It was imperative that I had them in shape too, because if anybody who's familiar with the artillery world knows we got guys who are carrying, and now ladies, guys, especially though, like some, bigger body frames, carrying around a little extra weight, maybe not the best in shape because, they're just used to jumping on a big vehicle or jumping in a truck and not having to walk really far. So we had to kind of flip our mindset and know, hey, when we hit the ground, I need everybody to do their best to be eating right. And that's a tall task with soldiers in general. We need to be staying in shape. And it was just really, as I said, focusing their mindset on being a soldier first and realizing that the best way they could have a positive impact was if they went out every day and executed those basic soldiering skills during each and every mission outside the wire.
I love it. I know you, Lee, you'll like this one. We'll take you on a tour of West Point, but the Army football strength coach's nickname is Satan. and he's a giant. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, Connor,
you need a guy like that. You need a guy like that.
Tradition there as far as fitness being in Army football.
No, absolutely. And it was, that was a very affectionate term. It has a negative connotation, but it was always said very affectionate.
Of course.
Since risen in the ranks, he oversees the entire athletic department, strength and conditioning now, if that gives you any indication of how accomplished this gentleman was. But there was always in the back of my mind, hey, if you are letting your guys down physically, you only have one person to blame for that. And that's look in the mirror. That's yourself. Right. And all those summer workouts, all those workouts during the season, they were always in the back of my mind because I didn't want to let anybody down. And if they had heard, oh, well, the mission failed because Lieutenant Crehan passed out from heat exhaustion because he was out of shape, I wouldn't be able to show my face around any of my buddies or around Satan. So that was always very important to maintain fitness.
That line, if we do a mini clip and take that line out of context, it's going to be really funny for people to hear. Like, yeah, I couldn't help Satan. But I'll tell you this, there's a few things I want to tap on, Connor. So when you talked about your service, especially your deployment, the parallels between how you described your time there and sports are pretty incredible. I got to do it for the team. I have to be in shape. I can't let people down. Obviously, the severity of those two situations are vastly different.
Right.
We're the same age. Okay. And I remember 9/11 happened in my senior year. I remember thinking around that time too, wow, one day I'm going to have to explain this to my kids or explain this to people. And we're kind of getting there. If you are graduating high school now, you were not alive when that happened, which is, again, almost surreal, probably for us, right? But a few things I want our listening audience to understand. When that happened, it was so confusing because we had all grown up on World War II stories in Vietnam, and you knew the enemy.
Yes.
And suddenly this thing happened, and no one really knew what to point a finger at. And then I remember being in college and bombing the Baghdad, it just was very confusing of, wait, who are we fighting and why? Now, anyone's thoughts on that right now? I'm not driving into that. This isn't a political discussion in any way. But what happened was I watched a lot of my friends and a lot of people go off to the military to serve. And I chose not to do that. I was an athlete as well. I played ice hockey. I did eventually marry into the military with my wife, as I said, but I was able to watch multiple things at this time. Again, I'm speaking to the athletes and coaches. One is I had the extreme privilege of working in New York City for 10 years following 9/11, and to watch that city get on its feet and move forward was one of the most impactful things I've ever experienced in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Of just, this is the worst thing that's ever happened in my life. This city stood up and walked forward. That was the first thing. The other thing was watching people my age and older and younger go over to the Middle East and do what they had to do. I am forever, to you and JB, thankful for your volunteer service and for what you have done for us to keep us safe and other people. That's number one. But that gave me such a grounding on team building. All right. Just kind of keeping this in the realm of what we do, of working for the person next to you, that there are some things bigger than yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you were born after 2001, I'm not saying you don't understand that concept, but I'm saying that when I was 18 years old, you were 17, we were seniors in high school, someone put a needle through our heart and gave us the ultimate perspective immediately, right? I don't wish that on anyone, right? But I just want to equate that, because I have spent probably my life since 9/11 trying to serve those that have served us in some form, whether that's my wife, you, JB, or anybody. So that's my anchor. I always talk about anchors on this show. Whenever I wake up, I feel like I'm having a bad day. I'm not over there, or I'm not doing this. Right.
Right. When I think about New York City and how that city responded post 9/11, and it's kind of apropos with your hat, it was just true grit. Right. And I think New York City really personified how we felt as a country.
Right.
Okay, that's your best shot. Cool. We're going to keep moving forward.
Right.
We're going to come right at you. And then, fast forward to Afghanistan, which may be a little more clear into why we were there. But then Iraq, the water gets a little muddy. Regardless, we were wearing the uniform. We decided we want to defend this country.
Right.
And we don't make the decision where you go. JB, that. Like, you don't make you don't make the decision, oh, well, I don't want to deploy to Iraq. I'd rather go to Afghanistan, or I'd rather go to Korea.
Yeah.
There's no like choice.
Not an option. Yeah.
Right.
Call orders.
What you do control is how you serve and how you protect that person to your right and to your left. And you stay behind them 100%. And me as a person, I look back at it now, and I think I'll similarly look back on it, 30 years from now, in our country's greatest time of need in the last 20 years, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine, just my personality, like just sitting on the sidelines and not doing something to help. And that comes in all different forms. As you said, like, it's not just the military. You could serve this country in a whole myriad of different ways.
Totally agree.
But I think it's important that we have those people who are willing to do that and willing to stand up for their teammates.
I will say this. Thank God we have people that are willing to do this. This is one of the most underappreciated things in our country. And it's done by people that are not asking for your appreciation. That takes it to a whole nother level. I've told this story before on here, that I had a good friend of mine who served, and it really bothered me when these men and women were coming home, and nobody here seemed to really care. Wasn't top of mind, I'll say. Right. And I asked him, I've told this to JB before. I said, how do you do this and come home? And does it hurt you that people don't care? And he goes, Lee, I'm doing this so you don't have to care. And I said, oh man, that is the perfect answer. It's like, that gave me perspective on it. I mean, how selfless all of you are. So anyway, look, I'm not trying to stay on this. I agree with you. And I'll tell you this, I've worked professional down to youth sports. And I always tell all of it, doesn't matter the age. If they're doing that, trying to save each other's lives in another place, we can play ice hockey today together. We can play football today together. It shouldn't be that hard. I don't care what drama is going on in school right now or in the locker room. It's not hard when you have an anchor. Mm-hmm. And you and everyone that served now and in the past and the future, you're my anchor. Every day I wake up thankful for that. So I'm going to say it again. Thank God we have men and women that are willing to do that. And there's no short supply. It continues. We have an all volunteer military still to this day. That's one of the greatest accomplishments I think this country has. So kind of look, I'm going to keep moving on. Unless we'll talk about this for like 6 hours. So you graduated from West Point in 06. And you, like you said, it wasn't long before you were in combat. And we said it, you were leading the best people. I think the military, the United States military specifically, is the greatest team on the planet. No one's even close. So from a leadership perspective, what's it like to lead people like that into combat? And what did you learn about yourself?
Wow, that's a great question. First and foremost, it's a privilege. It's at the same time, it's an immense responsibility, right? It's a privilege because you get to be out front and you get to say, follow me.
Right.
We're going to go get this done. We're going to accomplish the mission. But then it's a responsibility too, because here I am, 23 years old. I'm responsible for these men's lives. And I don't say that to be hyperbolic.
No,
that was the reality of it.
Literally, yes.
When all is said and done, I certainly loved my NCOs and I garnered so much input from them and I learned so much from them. But when push came to shove, the decisions were made by me alone, and they were my responsibility. That's tough to wrap your arms around when you're 23.
Right.
And now at 37, there are certainly things that I would have done differently. I think most people will say that as they reflect on their career in the military, their decisions.
So any career, right? Any career
for that matter.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
But certainly, I would have done things differently. But one thing I can absolutely say beyond the shadow of a doubt, I always put my men's interests before my own. And I always did my best for them, because I would not have been able to live with myself if I didn't give them every last ounce of me to them, because that's what they deserved, right? They didn't deserve me to just sit in a vehicle and say like, you guys go check out that random house where we got some intel if there's a weapons cache sitting, and maybe there's some sort of, explosives that are in the house. I'm not speaking to anybody else. I'm just saying for myself, I know I can put my head to my pillow at night knowing I gave those guys everything I had.
Right.
And it is the thing that I will be, no matter what else I accomplish in my life. I just got married. Hopefully I have children one day and I'm blessed that way, but I will never be more proud than when I stood up for my country and I led those men. That is the most proud I'll ever be in my life.
And your men saw it, Connor. They did. It's that lead. It's that lead by example. That's what you did. Mm-hmm. And I remember even at West Point, teaching there, and a cadet would say, "Not sure of a decision." I'm like, "Just go. They'll follow you."
Right.
If you're not sure, it's okay. Go. And when you look behind you, there'll be 15 dudes running with you. So don't worry about it.
JB, I want to follow up on this too, because there's two things I want to say to our audience. One is this: whenever we interview someone from the military, which we do a fair amount of here, you can almost take military language and verbiage and put sports verbiage in it, and it will still work. All right. 100%. But always remember, and I do this too, that sacrifice in the military means something completely different than sacrifice on the field or the ice. Okay. But you can interchange the two conversations. And that's what I always try and do. When you say the person next to me, and I never gave up, you could do that in sports too. You just have to keep it kind of even keeled in terms of your mind. The other thing, Connor, real quick, and I have to say this because this is a conversation I had with someone recently. They were talking about like courage and leadership. And this person, like a lot of people do, say, well, I don't want to put anything on anybody else. I want to take it all on myself. So no one can blame anybody but me. And I said, that's not courage and leadership. Real courage and leadership is what you just said. When other people rely on you and you're willing to put yourself out there. In your case, someone might not live. When it comes to a job, someone might lose their job. That is real courage and leadership. When you're willing to put yourself on the line with somebody else's life or work, that's the step up. The one I talked about before is a step, in my opinion, step behind that. Okay. First off, no one does it alone. Nobody. Nobody. It doesn't happen in anything. No one can survive alone on this planet. Right. So to take it all in yourself and to do it by yourself, to me, is actually I don't want to call it weak, but it's just, that's not the full picture of leadership. Right. So sorry, I just had to get that out. You go ahead.
No, it's a great point, and it's so true. And to use the, the sports analogy, like if you look up my name, you're not going to find a whole bunch of stats. Right. And I had to realize, regardless of how much I touch the field, I can still contribute, and I could still look out for that guy to my right and to my left.
Right.
Like you look at the greatest athletes who have ever played any given sport, name a name. I think to a man, to a woman, they would probably all point to a coach, to a teammate that allowed them to reach that level.
Right.
So it was, my responsibility, specifically in Army football when I was playing, to make sure I was giving it my all in summer workouts. Because I knew everybody else we're all looking around at each other. And by me giving my all, I'm pushing that starter to get his all.
Setting a standard.
I'm setting a standard. Exactly.
Right.
And I think that's why, it's all interchangeable. And one other thing I will say is kind of like that example. It was great to have guys like JB back at the academy because we could pick their brains. And again, you're not doing it on your own. Anybody who comes out of West Point or ROTC or any commissioning source and as an officer thinks like, well, I'm the officer and I'm going to get it done today. No, you're going to fail. Right. You need those NCOs. You need those life lessons from guys like JB who have been there, done that. And you need to rely on that, because if you try to go at it alone, you are going to be a miserable failure.
Right. I totally agree. That's a great way.
No, and a couple things, Connor, you talked about, you were a superstar in the role asked of you. And that's so important, in the military, as a combat officer, right? Everybody wants the assault, but sometimes you don't get the assault. You get security or support. Right. We still got to do that very well. Right. And I think it's so important to understand, all the importance. I think finally, like as a sergeant major, like I saw it in Afghanistan, and I saw people, working in the office, doing paperwork, that sort of thing. And I'm like, that dude's working way harder than me. Yeah. Like that dude's working, every single day with 2 hours of sleep. Like I can take a day off if I want, but, right. And it's so, and that's one thing I think that people miss about the military. I say this, Connor, respectfully, when a civilian asks me about, combat and what you do, and they're like, oh, you're a gunfighter, I was like, time out.
They should never be asking you that.
Yeah. First off, combat changes everyone. Mm-hmm. Combat changes everyone. And that dives into my question, Connor, for you, transition out of the military or sports. Like we do such a good job of recruiting. And then when we're done with you, we're done with you. Yeah. We're done with you. Whether, I worked in pro sports. So did Lee. And your background as well. And same thing in the military. We're done with you. We're done with you. Now we're trying to get a little better. I get it, especially in the military. We're trying to transition a little bit. I suffer from PTS and I dealt with it for 10 years before I even got help, because I was like, I'm a sergeant major. I'm not doing anything. Like what, first time I walked into a VA clinic and it was a gong show. I'm like, I'm out of here and never coming back. Right. So, and I didn't go back for 10 years, and I suffered with all of this. So, you were part of that military's new resilience program. I know West Point has a big branch on that, Center for Enhanced Performance and Resiliency and all that. Just elaborate on that for us and what you've learned and that process of maybe what you had to deal with.
I went through something very similar to you, JV, when I got back from Iraq and they say, okay, do you need to talk to anyone? I'm like, nope, I'm all good. Good to go.
And Connor, the people they give you to talk to, like, have no idea what you're dealing with. Like, hello.
Yeah.
I'm like,
right.
So, number one, I'm like, oh, I'm fine. And then, also you could trace this all back. I'm an Irish Catholic. So as I joke, like I ignore my problems till they just go away. But then I started to transition out of the military. And what I realized was like, oh, wait, there's other stuff going on here. And then I think back like, well, I don't want to admit that something's wrong with me. Like, I'm an Army football player. I'm a West Point guy. I'm supposed to be mentally tough, tougher than everybody else.
Exactly.
And what I realized was true mental toughness was being okay. And again, getting out in front of your guys and saying, hey guys, this is okay. Let's go see somebody. Let's go talk to someone. Because JB, to your point, like, how are you going to tell me you're around loud explosions, gunfire, putting your head to your pillow at night, not knowing if something's going to happen while you're asleep? That's going to affect anybody. You could be the most mentally tough person on the planet. Those things are real and visceral. They're going to have an effect on your mental state. So why would you think you're going to come away from that unscathed? You have to be an idiot to think you're going to come and not be unaffected. So once I was able to, I think, and this came with my maturity, with my age, once I realized, oh, wait, dude, like, there's nothing wrong with you. I think there's still the stigma. We're working to break down that stigma that, like, there's something wrong with you if you have PTS, if you're dealing with anxiety, if you're dealing with depression. There's nothing wrong with you. It's like if somebody got in a car accident and their arm was chopped off, they wouldn't say, oh, something's wrong with you. It's like, no, you got in a car accident. Our brains got in a car accident. And for a lot of us, multiple car accidents.
Yeah, like 100 times.
Like 100 car accidents.
Yeah.
Something's going to be wrong. You don't walk away from that unscathed. So I think what's been so great about having a platform and a podcast is that you can speak to people and say, listen, it's okay. We're doing it. We're getting help. My co-host Chaps likes to say, if you had a tooth that was decaying, you'd go to the dentist. You'd get it fixed. Something's going on with your brain. Go to the brain doctor, get it fixed. And it looks different for everybody. And I started to see it a little bit when I was my last job in the military. I worked in Fort Hood at the resiliency campus, where we took like a chaplain and life skills and counseling and all these things. We put it on like the 1 square block, so guys wouldn't have to go search the entirety of Fort Hood to find all these places. We took everything they needed and put it in one place. Right. So, and I started to see guys come more and more and talk to the chaplain. I'm like, wow, Fort Hood's pretty religious. And what I'm realizing now, and what I realized after the fact, was they just needed somebody to talk to that they knew wouldn't judge them, that they knew wouldn't run it up the flagpole. And I think that's the hardest part for guys and girls who are still serving, is that, well, if I go admit that I have these problems, it's going to negatively impact my career. Right. And that's not the case, or it shouldn't be the case. If you're a good leader and you look at someone differently because they want to get their brain fixed, you're an idiot. So I think it's just a continuous battle. Now this is the battle that I'm fighting now alongside my teammates, to bring down that stigma and bring resources to other people and to let them know it's all right. You were in 100 mental car accidents.
Right.
Go see the doctor.
You know, just to bring somewhat of a civilian point to this again for the audience, you know, when I was at RAF Lakenheath, I like to read a lot of military books just to learn how the military operates under pressure and situations from a coaching standpoint. And I picked up this book one day called On Killing, which I'm sure you're both familiar with. And it's a tough book to read. But I think the first thing, if I'm not mistaken, the first thing you read in that book is basically human beings were never meant to do this. Like, humans are not meant to act this way against other humans. It's not in our nature. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading that and really taking it almost a mental step back. Like, my God, you know, what are we doing to people, right? Like, mentally, what is this doing to our men and women? And again, divided severity here, but in sports, this can happen too. It's not the same. I'm going to admit that obviously right away, but the drive for mental fitness and mental awareness is going forward. Look to our military leaders, my friends. They are saying that it's okay. If you're a varsity high school athlete, and trust me, there's a lot of pressure on you. There's a lot of pressure in high school sports and college sports.
Absolutely.
But even our leaders in the military are saying it's okay to not be okay.
Right.
Right. We need to start preaching that more and more and more from a mental fitness standpoint. In fact, and you alluded to this, Connor, like It's not weak to not get help, right? It's strength to get help. That's what I'm trying to say. Mental strength is getting help when you need it. Saw a professional goaltender one time, self-admittedly mentally ill, says it. I am mentally ill, but that does not mean I'm mentally weak. Said that publicly. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting distinction. Like, this guy does have issues, but he's not weak because of it, right? He's strong. So anyway, Connor, I really do appreciate bringing it up. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that reminds me, General Schwarzkopf, and I'm paraphrasing here, but his term for courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite that being fearful. So same thing with mental courage. It's not the absence of any sort of hindrance. It's knowing that there's an hindrance there and moving forward anyway and getting that help and making yourself a better person. So you talk about mental courage that can cross over, whether it's sports, the military. I think that's what true courage looks like in today's day and age.
I agree with you 100%. I think that's a great quote. Okay, listen, well, I'm going to get into Zero Block 30 in a minute, but I have a football question I got to ask.
Yeah.
So obviously in research for the show, you're right. By the way, there isn't much about you online. You're not wrong about that for those of you listening, which I appreciate the challenge, but I did go to your Twitter and this is a question I'm throwing in right now. You tweeted recently about Peyton Manning being the greatest quarterback. Now, I've always loved to ask this question because I'm not a big fan of GOAT debates because, like, there's no parameters every time you have this debate. It's like, this guy was the best, but you said Peyton was the best.
Yep.
All right. Doesn't have the most Super Bowls in the world. I want to know why you put him in that status. What is it about him that makes him the best? Because I have a feeling it has very little to do with actually his football ability.
Correct. And I think it has everything to do with his brain. And, like, obviously the easy answer is Tom Brady because, the records, the rings, everything. It's like, and, he played well in big games. But I think when you talk to defensive coaches and defenders who played against Peyton Manning, they said it was like playing against a computer. I think he was doing stuff at the line of scrimmage well before anybody else was doing it. I just think when you think about knowing where to go with the ball, knowing what play to check to. And I always go back to this example. When you used to watch Colts games back in the day, and this reminds me of one of my first practices in college. I remember I didn't throw to the right receiver, and I told my coach he wasn't open. And my coach was like, "What are you talking about? The guy was a yard or a half a yard behind him. That's what open looks like in college, just so you know." So you can imagine what does open look like in the NFL?
That's a good one.
It just doesn't look open.
It doesn't look open to the naked eye. It's even smaller.
Yeah.
So when Peyton Manning would throw to receivers and there wasn't a defender within 10 yards, do you think that was just like, oh, every time the defender fell down? No, that's because he knew so well and was so over-prepared for what that defense was doing, and he knew the exact right play to check into to get his receiver wide open. I'm telling you, go back and look at highlights.
Oh, I remember.
He threw dudes. I'm telling you, there was not a DB anywhere near these dudes. There's a reason for that. And I feel like it's a losing argument because everyone's just always going to point to Brady. And that's not to say that Tom Brady isn't accomplished, very good, great, and has some of the same mental capacity. I just think Peyton Manning was on a different level than anybody else ever was.
Look, again, and anytime any of you listening have a GOAT debate, you have to define parameters. Like, what is a GOAT? Because if we're just talking about wins, sure, it's Brady. That's an easy one, right? But if you talk about an overall human being or overall atmosphere of something, it can change the debate. That's why in basketball, it's so hard to do this. What I remember about Peyton is this is probably the second half of his career. First half of his career, before he won the Super Bowl, everybody was always up in arms about it. But I remember watching him call every play. And I remember thinking, why can't my quarterback do that? By the way, grew up an Eagles fan, so we had a long drought with that.
I'm in an Eagles household as well. My wife's a big Eagles fan, so I get it.
So yeah, we live on miracles and things that don't make sense. But I remember watching Manning call every play in the game, and them joking on the TV about how his coach and his offensive coordinator don't have to do anything.
Yeah,
I said, that's just not normal. Like you said, he's calling every play, and I think that there is some merit to that. The guy is a genius, and again, we gotta say this again. This doesn't take away from Brady or any other great quarterback.
But it's like, how do you measure that? There's no way to measure that unless you kind of really know what you're looking at and what to look for.
Well, Brady was also surrounded by unbelievable teams and probably the greatest tactical coach of all time. So it takes nothing away. I found that interesting that
I don't think the argument is as clear cut as everybody would like it to be.
Right.
And here, I'll give you one other example. What I think makes part of what makes Peyton Manning great, I think he's a great human. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you two quick stories about Peyton Manning. 2 nights before his first Super Bowl against the Bears in 2007, I happened to be at the same restaurant as Peyton Manning. I got walked over and introduced to Peyton Manning. He stood and he's having dinner 2 nights before the Super Bowl with his wife, and he takes 3 to 5 minutes to talk to me, a complete stranger. And maybe afterwards when I walked away, he said, "I can't believe that jerk just came over and got introduced to me." That was annoying. But then here's the true mark, I think, of what makes him great. When he got done with his career and he retired, I wrote him a letter. Again, other than that one interaction, I don't know Peyton Manning from Adam. He doesn't know who the hell I am. But I took the time to write him a note and just say, like, I really enjoyed watching you play. Unbelievable career. I wish you all the best in the future. A few weeks later, I get a manila envelope in the mail. It's from Denver. He took the time to take an 8x10 and write me a note and say, "Thanks for the letter." And then, sign this picture. Like, the fact that he took the time to, one, seemingly read the letter, and then 2, on top of that, send something back as a thank you, I just think speaks to who he is as a human.
Right. I think that's amazing. And I'm guessing you weren't expecting anything back, right?
No.
Exactly.
No.
It just brings up a good point. And again, we've interviewed, JB and I, lots of coaches, administrators, and players. That's a common thread amongst the best, is that they're not just great, talented athletes. In fact, I could show you millions and millions of talented athletes, but the type of people they are is really what separates them. We've heard that about JB, about Sidney Crosby. We've heard that about lots of different athletes that we've interviewed. And again, I'm not saying Brady wouldn't do that. We're just saying that this is the type of person that Peyton Manning is. And then the way he honors the game is something else I notice about him. Like, the game is a sacred thing to him. Mm-hmm. In fact, I remember watching him get into the Hall of Fame, and then I remember him holding back the tears. And if you remember, you get that gritty look on his face, and he just doesn't want to cry. Which you could have a debate about whether or not that's okay or not. But the guy loves this process in the game so much. He's still dedicating his life to it. So
right.
Anyway, I just thought that was interesting that I saw that recently, right?
Mm-hmm.
A few days ago, and I had to ask you about that. So here's another question for you. Okay. You could have gone into finance. You could have gone into coaching full-time, myriad of business ventures after West Point, after your career. You end up on one of the most popular podcasts ever, right? Through Barstool Sports. How did Zero Blog 30 come about? And what is your end state for it, if there is one, or is it just something you fell into and it's something that is really driving you forward?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I didn't set out to have a podcast. Even as podcasts started becoming a thing, about 10 years ago, and really started to gain steam, I didn't set out to do that. I was always a fan. I've been a fan of Barstool Sports going back to when I deployed to Iraq in 2008. My cousin sent me a link and said, "Hey, here's a funny website." And I just became enamored by it and followed it. And then when I got out of the military, moved back to New York, I became friendly with some of the New York City Barstool guys. And this is still when everything was kind of split up. And then I had a little experience doing some podcasts and speaking on a microphone, and that was fun. But again, it wasn't done intentionally. And then my co-host Chaps was hired by Barstool in the summer of 2016. The end of the summer of 2016, he puts out a tweet. "Hey, I want to start a podcast for veterans. If you're a veteran with a funny story, send me a note. I think this could be like an online American Legion VFW type conversation where we just have conversations about the military, about the world, about anything. And it feels like you're sitting at the American Legion with your battle buddy, having a glass of whiskey on a Friday." So I just sent him a DM about this one story of a time I had to bail one of my soldiers out of jail, and he paid me back with a check that 2 weeks later bounced. And when I confronted soldier about the incident. He said, "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about. I have checks in my checkbook. The check should be good." Not realizing that you have to have money in your checking account to write a check. So he asked me, I typed up that story. He asked me to record for 15 minutes the following day. He and I end up talking for an hour. We just had an instant rapport. Right. Enlisted, Marine NCO, dog handler, West Point officer. Our experiences similar in the military, but also drastically different. And the dichotomy of our viewpoints on the military specifically were very good. And they just kind of meshed, that we came at it from two different angles. And so he asked me after that first hour-long convo, "Hey, can you do this again next week? Can you do this again next week?" The fourth week, we're in studio because he lives in San Antonio. So he's up in New York. We're in studio. He's introduced in the episode. We're interviewing Rob O'Neill. And he says, "I got Connor with me. And I think Connor's just going to be my co-host." I didn't know he was going to say that. So that was September 2016. Now we're, June 2022, going on 6 years. And we set out to, again, be that online escape for people. And I think we've accomplished that.
Oh, yeah.
But we don't necessarily have an end goal in sight. I think it's just a continuous work in progress, always trying to do better. We've made it a point to really hone in on mental health and use our platform in that way. We've used our platform and our followings to raise money for different veteran organizations. So I think, like, our overarching goal, be a positive influence for the veteran community and our country at large, but specifically for our veteran community. And that's a job that's never done. I think, we're always just kind of like molding our show to continue to evolve, continue to take on topics that warrant a discussion. Most of the time it's pretty funny. We try to take a comedic look at things that are going on in the military politics, but there are times that we can't do that. We have to take a very serious look at what's going on in our country and have harder conversations. But
you did a fantastic episode about Ukraine. I was viewing that. Like, you're not kidding. Like, this show is all over the place in a good way.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And, the longer that we do it, and I'll just speak for myself and not my other two co-hosts, but I feel a sense of responsibility, because once you realize that there's people in the military still that are listening to you,
right?
And they're, because veterans, they'll send messages or come up to us. We're at an event. Like, it's weird, because whether you're sitting in a studio or you're sitting on Zoom the way we are right now, and I'm looking at two faces, right? You don't think, like, who else is going to actually listen to this? And then someone will come up to you and say, "Hey, I was going through a tough time with my commander, and something you said was able to help, bridge that gap. Or I was dealing with XYZ and something you guys said," and you're taken aback and like, whoa, I didn't set out to really impact other people like that. But then you realize you have a responsibility. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, now I think we look around, we're like, hey, we have a responsibility. We've grown this into something that can reach some people. So we have to be intentional about what we say, who we have on as guests, and make sure that we can still be a positive impact on the veteran community.
No, and I think what's so important there, what you said, Connor, is, back in the day, my father, God rest his soul, was a World War II veteran, and a lot of the Vietnam veterans, they had the VFW, American Legion, AMVETS. That's where they used to go after work,
right?
To have a 10-cent beer, right? They would do, and they would talk about their problems. Well, that doesn't happen now. There's not these groups that do that. People either work online or they work too far, that sort of thing. It's not these hometown jobs. And so what you're doing is you're reaching this group that can talk about these type of things. I think you guys have a great dynamic, and then along with Kate, I think you just bring you bring all of this. As you said, you have a couple Marines there. You're Army. You're an officer. Like, everybody thinks differently, and I think it's important to do that. It's important to think differently. and bring that together. It's amazing what you do. It's a great, and I hope it just continues to just,
I appreciate that.
Just continues to just, and listen, if you can affect that, that one, you got some young specialist that's listening to you. And it's like, you know what? All right, I got my ass chewed by my commander. It's going to be okay.
Right.
It's not the first time.
I also want to say too that, and I kind of set you up to say this, which I appreciate that you did, is that, there is no end game, right? It's about being present. It's about today and what I'm doing today. And I don't think enough people approach life like that, right? Like even young athletes, well, I got to get to college and I got to get to hey, enjoy where you're at for a moment. Just enjoy. Like it's great to have aspirations, but if you're not enjoying the journey, you're missing the whole point.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to remember, and it's so hard now with social media, because it's so easy to look to your left and your right and see like, well, Joey's doing this, or, Susie's got this job. Yeah. You got to remember, social media is a highlight reel. And that was a hard thing for me too, coming out of West Point. I mean, I look around at some of these people that have come from my school and it's like, oh man, if I'm not a Fortune 100 CEO, I'm a pretty big failure. And you realize that everybody is going through life at a different speed, and everyone's going on a roller coaster. Nobody's life is strictly going up. Everybody has ups and downs, and we all go through those ups and downs at different times. And you have to realize, I think, the biggest competition you're ever going to face in your life is the one you have with yourself.
100%.
So, that includes making sure your mental health is on track, making sure you got those blinders on to not worry about what other people are doing in their careers, in the military, in the civilian world. Focus on being the best version of yourself, because then you'll succeed. No matter what anybody else is doing, you can control your success. Exactly. So I think that's so important. And then also simultaneously such a challenge in today's day and age, because as you said, Lee, everyone's putting up their highlight reel. I'm not posting about yesterday when I got done with a run and I was sucking wind, because I haven't been running as far these days. No one's posting that. So you got to just, keep that in mind and just continue to strive to be the best version of yourself. And maybe that sounds a little canned or corny, but it's true. You got to ignore everybody else and just focus on what you can control.
I don't think it sounds corny at all. In fact, it was Nick Foles after winning the Super Bowl that said, part of he almost quit because of his mental health. And he said it. He said, like, I was on social media. He goes, it's a human highlight reel. It's not reality. Mm-hmm. He goes, I had to stop doing that. And then obviously the rest is history with him, at least that season. But yeah, look, people rarely post their failures. You don't go online and say, like, oh man, I really screwed up today. I did. Yeah. Some people do.
Right.
All right. But
it's good.
But yeah, people don't do that. So anyway, young people listening again.
And I love this story, Connor, how you got the job, everything else. I actually had to bail a ranger out of a Bangkok jail, believe it or not, with like 3 cases of MREs and a whoopee, and it was hilarious. So
I'd like to hear that story one day.
Kid got picked up for doing nothing, but he really wasn't.
Back on your podcast, but he's got lots of stories.
So, no, Connor, we talk about mental health, mental fitness, mental toughness. What it is. We try to describe it. Toughness, the ability to compete at the highest level, regardless of what's happening. As an Army officer, you got to bring calm to the chaos sometimes, because there's chaos everywhere and you need to be the one focused. So when we talk about mental toughness, give us your own description. How can we help others? How can you give somebody that's listening to this podcast a tip on increasing their mental toughness, their mental stability, their mental resilience?
I think the best thing that I could say is be retrospective and introspective and take stock of where you're at, right? I think it's also because, of how fast paced our lives are. And especially if you're talking about a professional athlete or an athlete in general, and, everything is scheduled for you and everything is just laid out how you're supposed to do and what success looks like versus failure. And you could really turn your brain off and just move forward. You need to take a step back whenever you can get a chance and take stock of where you're at. Where am I at physically with my workouts? How am my workouts doing it? Like, am I exceeding, or am I just kind of plateauing? What's going on? Mentally, am I in a good place? Am I showing up to workouts excited to be there? Or am I showing up to workouts recently and I'm kind of dreading showing up? Because if you don't take stock of what's going on and look, try to crawl inside your brain and, kind of like a garage, if you never get in your garage and clean it out, it's just going to accumulate more stuff, right? And all that bad stuff is going to be in there with the good stuff, but it's just going to be clutter. You got to keep your garage clean. So you got to every now and again take a step back and get away from, and this is not just athletics either. I think this is everybody. I mean, everybody has their routines of what they're doing every day. You don't want to just put your head down and plow forward. Whether that's weekly, bi-week, whatever the cadence works for you, take stock of what's going on. And I think if you are taking stock, and also when you take stock, be honest with yourself, right? Because if you're lying and you're saying, oh yeah, everything's great. Like, oh yeah, I crushed that workout yesterday, but you actually didn't. And maybe everything's not okay. You're only hurting yourself. So I think, be introspective and be honest with your assessment. And I think if you can do those two things, it will allow you to continue to succeed and to overcome obstacles, and also to bounce back when things are hard or something negatively impacts you.
Love it.
Yeah. And Connor, what you're talking about, which is fantastic, is really kind of consciousness, right? Or being aware of your consciousness.
Yep.
And it's funny because I always tell athletes, you already know how to do this. And they go, well, what do you mean? I said, how many of you have been in the zone? Who's ever been in the zone? Whatever sport you're playing. I said, what do you think the zone is? It's extreme present moment awareness and consciousness. That's all it is. It's just, you're very present, right? It's after you're in the zone where the thoughts start creeping in your head. So as athletes, you actually have some experience in this, because there are people that are born and die having never experienced that. All right. If you can be in the zone in a game, you can get in the zone a lot more than just the game. And the best athletes, and I bet you Peyton Manning does this, I bet you Brady does this, they are in the present moment so much that it's easy for them.
Yes.
I always talk about The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary, the Bulls documentary. The thing in that documentary, you just talked about this, that everyone kind of glosses over, and it kills me because it was probably the most impactful part. They say in like the last episode, I think Michael Jordan is the most present person I've ever met. He is so present all the time. That is how he makes amazing plays. He's in the zone almost all the time. He practices that.
Yep.
You practice that. JB, you practice that. And if you're not great at it, that's okay. That's absolutely okay. You're not going to be an all-star quarterback after throwing the ball once. That's not how it works. You got to practice. And
doing the work in the dark places, though. Doing the work in the dark places where no one's watching.
Right.
We're saying like the work, no one's watching. Do it there. You don't have to. Hockey player, I shot $1,000 today. Great. You don't have to post that. Just do it.
Why not, JB? Right? You're supposed to post. That's a highlight reel. But no, those are the audience. As you said, look, mental fitness, just like physical fitness. If you stop practicing it, you're going to get out of shape.
Right.
All right.
Right. And I think the companion to that consciousness is confidence. And then that's how you succeed. Yeah. That's how you succeed.
I love it. That's a great statement and a great way to end this episode, Connor. So, hey, listen, fantastic interview. I knew we were in for a good one today, but it was even better than I thought it was going to be. So I can't thank you enough for being here today. And and again, sharing the mic with JB is always an honor for me, but having both of you up here today is truly an honor. Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It's interesting, kind of what we were all just talking about. Talking to you guys was a great opportunity, because I think sometimes I get so head down talking about the topics on Zero Blog 30 that I don't really ever get a chance to talk about stuff like this. So this really is a treat and a welcomed event for me. So I appreciate that. JB, thank you always for your service to the country, your continued service. And Lee, thank you very much for thinking enough of me to have me on the show. So thank you both very much. And Caitlin behind the scenes producing everything. Thank you very much for staying on top of me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. For those who are listening, Caitlin's really the one that makes this happen.
100%. And Lee, I'll leave you with this. This is an honor to Connor. General George Marshall in World War II. He said, "I want an officer for a secret and dangerous mission. I want a West Point football player." So Connor, you're a great American. Thank you for all you did for our country and what you're continuing to do. So
thank you very much.
Beat Navy.
Beat Navy.
Well, I'll end this by saying I want to thank everyone that's ever volunteered for our armed services for your service. And that's going to do it for this episode of Win Championship Trades for Life. Again, we're powered by Pivotal Moments Media. Go check out our channel grid at pivotalmomentsmedia.com. And you can also check out our other channels. We've got something for everybody. So for Connor Crehan and JB Spizo, I'm Lee Elias. Thanks for listening. Keep an eye out for more podcasts soon, wherever podcasts can be heard. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks so much for listening to this edition of Win Championship Trades for Life. If you like what you heard, go ahead and hit that subscribe button or that like button wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, pivotalmomentsmedia.com. And remember, Win is part of Grit, a Pivotal Moments Media channel, which is working to break the stigma surrounding mental fitness in sports. Again, visit pivotalmomentsmedia.com for more episodes, content, and education on how we can tackle that challenge together. Keep climbing, and we'll see you on the next episode.